All right, welcome everyone to the water harvesting session number 1. I'm redoing this talk, which I did last week as well, with a few minor changes, but it's more or less the same content as last week. And it's an introduction to water solutions for growing food during Cape Town's dry season. Sorry. There we go. So this is our agenda, which you might have seen in the invitation. I just added also that we're going to just quickly look at our context, the Cape Town's climate. Then we're going to look at how to calculate rainwater catchments and needs, have an overview of those water sources that are available to us as urban gardeners, and then look at an example of water harvesting here in my garden in Hout Bay. And then we'll have a look at what information you first need to find to start mapping your site. This talk will take about an hour, and I just ask for you all to have your microphones off, but you can have your video on if you want. And please hold questions until I've sort of covered one section, and then I'll stop for questions. And let's just have clarifying questions during the talk, and then after the talk you can add sort of more extensive questions, but not to sort of change the subject while I'm still in the talk, please. Okay, so here's a map of South Africa, and the dark blue bit is the part of the country that has this winter rainfall. It's called the Mediterranean climate because it's the same climate as they have around the Mediterranean in sort of Italy and Greece and those countries. So we've got rain in winter and a warm, dry summer, which is quite different from the whole rest of the country, which has summer rainfall. And so if you compare these two pictures here, you can see Johannesburg at the top, and then Cape Town is the second picture. You see, just as the temperatures rise in Joburg, that's when they have their rain. But it's the opposite picture in Cape Town. We get our rain right when the temperatures are lower, but then when the temperatures get higher in summer, that's when we don't have rain. So it's a bit of a problem because we really have this stretch of hot, dry time in summer when we don't have water, and that's our main growing time, really. So it's a challenge. And we're going to be talking quite a bit about millimeters of rain. So I just wanted to first go over what that means. What is a millimeter of rain? What does that mean? And the top of my stairs happens to be just about a square meter. So I thought I'd take this picture of a liter of milk on a square meter of space. So because for every millimeter of rain you get, that means you're getting a liter of water for every square meter of space. So you can imagine if you were to pour this water out onto that space, it would be exactly a millimeter high. That's what that means. So we can take that a little bit further. And if you imagine that same square meter with the same liter of milk on it, each square meter gets that liter on it. So when there's a millimeter of rain, you know that each square meter of your garden has basically received a liter of water. And that also then means that if there's 5 mils of rain, that means you're getting 5 liters of water on every square meter of space. So that's a pretty important thing to understand. So let's just see if anyone's got any questions on that. Please unmute yourself if you'd like to ask about that. Okay, we can come back to it later if you're not sure, but let's go on. So we'll just have a quick look at some graphs. I hope it's not too off-putting, but it's quite interesting, I think, just to look at the rainfall in different parts of Cape Town. So Wynberg, this graph is from the Climate Systems Analysis Group. They have historic data, which means information about what happened in the past. So each of these lines is 1 year of rainfall. And you can see it starts with the 1st of January. It goes all the way along to the next 1st of January. So each line shows how much rain they got in Wynberg in that particular year. And over here, you can see that it's possible to tick the years you want to have highlighted. And I'll highlight the last 5 years. So those are now showing in these colors. And you can see that the colorful lines are actually the lowest ones of all the last 20 years. So in recent years, we've been getting less rain than in the past. And this red line here is 2020. You can see it's also going to come in somewhere over here. So I would guess that's about 750 mils of rain. So that means if we go back, if you think about that square meter with the liter of milk on top of it, you're going to get 750 liters of milk on every square meter in Wynberg. Not milk, of course, but water. But let's look at some other parts of Cape Town. Blackheath is near Kuilsrivier, and it gets much less. But it's the same pattern. The same thing is that the last 5 years have been the lowest of the last 20. But it's going to come in at about 350 this year, a lot less than in Wynberg. And the same story in Gugulethu. I don't know if Vuyani is here today, but Gugulethu is near the airport, so I put this in for Vuyani. And I couldn't find an up-to-date graph for that place. So this is an old graph, but it's the same story. It's, 2017, of course, it was the year of the worst drought, or the worst part of the drought we just had recently. But that one is also going to come in very low there. So I'd say if you compare it with the other pictures, it'll probably be in here about 350 or so on average at the moment. And then let's just look at Newlands as well, which gets a lot more rain than the other places we've seen. But they also are getting less than they used to. As you can see, the colorful lines are coming in lower than all the other lines, almost without exception. And I'd say on average, they're getting about 1,300 now of millimeters of rain every year. So if we look at the whole of Cape Town, you'll see it's very variable between the suburbs. So it goes from 350 all the way to about 2,000. And it fluctuates hugely from year to year as well. And we all know about climate change as well. So we can expect far more extremes as well. So we might get really good rain years still, but we might also get really low ones. So it's going to be very variable, and climate change will bring extremes. I also just put Hout Bay in because that's, of course, of interest to me. And it's similar, I guess, to the Wynberg story. On average, probably somewhere around 700, 750. So if we want to grow food here, we've really got to use a combination of strategies, right? So on both the supply side and the demand side, we need to do stuff. So we need to use and lose as little water as possible. And we also need to catch and store as much water as possible. Now, this talk is mostly about the catching and storing, but I do just want to look at one screen about the using and losing as little water as possible. So just want to mention that, and then the rest of the talk will be about the catching and storing. So to make sure that we, don't need a lot of water, one way to do that is to make sure we've got lots of organic matter in the soil. So that helps to make a sponge. Organic matter makes it a nice loamy soil, and that's the best soil to store water in. It can actually store a huge amount of water. We also want to put a thick mulch on top, like about 10 centimeters thick, to really prevent evaporation. So we're preventing the soil from drying out. We want to plant the plants close together, so it's a dense planting, and that covers the soil as well, a bit like a mulch does as well. It's preventing the soil from drying out. The plants themselves also offer some cover. And then we can also look at things like windbreaks, tunnels, shade cloth, all sorts of things one can do to protect the garden during extreme temperatures from wind and heat, actually. And just never to leave the soil exposed to the sun. So you always want to cover it with a mulch or with cover cropping or something, even if you're not actually growing something productive right now. So I always think of bare soil as a wound in nature's skin. So just like a wound will grow skin again, nature will cover itself if it can with weeds or whatever's handy. But we can really help protect the soil by covering it ourselves. Oh, sorry. Then we can also do things like wicking beds and sunken beds, which are ways to also prevent evaporation. I can't go into all the detail of these things, but these are all things you can also look up if you're interested in it. And then, of course, just making sure that no water leaves the site. So sort of try and get as much water into the site and not let any leave. So find ways, and we'll look at that later, to sink it into the ground before it runs off. Another way to use as little water as possible is to use indigenous or water-wise crops. So again, you can actually Google this. Some veggies need much less water than others. So if you're going to have a tight situation, not a lot of water, plant those crops that need less. And then lastly, irrigate in a water-wise way. Don't just spray the water through the air. It's the Cape, the southeaster often just blows it off to other places. So apply it as close to the soil as possible. Use things like drip irrigation, soaker hose, and water deeply. So you want to sort of rather water once, but well, rather than lots of times and just a little bit, because then you're just watering the top, and that's just going to dry out again. So that's using and losing as little as possible. Now we want to do this catching and storing as much as possible of this magical, wonderful stuff. So our water sources in urban gardens, these are the ones we're going to be looking at. Roof water, storm water. The first two, of course, are rain. It's the same thing, but one is coming off the roof and storm water is coming off a road or a paved area, but it's less clean. So the water you get off the roof, you can use in the house if you use a filter or something. You can drink and cook with it and so on. But you wouldn't do that with water that you've caught off a road or a paved area. But the stormwater is, of course, still great for the garden. Then we're going to be looking at grey water, and I'll explain what that is later. We'll look at well and borehole water as well, and then municipal water. So here's a great example of roof water harvesting. So what we've got here is guttering all the way along the roof, and the guttering leads into a pipe, which then leads into these tanks. And the tanks are joined together at the bottom, which means that if these taps here are open, then the 3 tanks are almost like one tank. It means that when water flows into one of the tanks, all of them will fill up. So the level will go up and down together in all the tanks at the same time. So whether you're filling or pumping out, they basically act as one tank. And then there's also an overflow pipe here. So when the tanks are full, the water will come out and flow into this little channel here. And I'm hoping that this channel leads off into a garden, a swale or something, and that it won't go to waste. And I'll explain what a swale is just now as well. So how much rain can I catch off my roof? So this is just a little formula. First, we need to know the catchment area, and then we need to know the rainfall. And if we multiply the catchment area by the rainfall, that's how much water we're going to catch. So here we have how to work out your catchment area. So your catchment area is the length times the width of your roof. So here we have a roof, and if we measure from here to here, we've got the length, and then we measure straight across from here to here. I don't know if you can see my mouse pointer. That's your width. So you might be thinking, well, why don't I measure up there and back down again? And that's because actually the area of your catchment is this square here. And it doesn't matter what shape your roof is underneath, regardless what shape your roof is, it's this area that is actually your catchment. And that's what you're going to be measuring. So you measure along there, that's your length, and then from this tip to this tip, and that's your width. So for example, if you measured along here and it was 8 meters, and you measure along here and it's 11 meters, you'd get 88 square meters. That's what we call square meters. And to show that it's square meters, we put a little 2 next to the M. Right, and then let's say another example, if you had a square house that's 10 meters by 10 meters, you'd get 100 square meters of catchment area. Okay, so is everyone happy with that? Okay.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. Great. Okay. Now, the next thing we need to find out, you remember we said here it's catchment area times rainfall. So now we've worked out the catchment area. Now we're going to rainfall. So we can find out what the rainfall is in various ways. You might have a rain gauge that will tell you your most recent rain. Or you might be looking for historic data. That's like we just saw in the screens before. This website is fantastic for finding out what things were like in the past. And based on the past, we can sort of get a sense of what the future might be like. And then, of course, we can also look at weather apps, and they usually just show us what's expected in the next little while, in the next week or so. So, all these places, you'll find rainfall in millimeters, right? And if you remember right at the beginning, I showed you what 1 millimeter of rain is. So now we're going to be multiplying that catchment area in square meters by the rainfall in millimeters, and that gives us an amount in liters. So you can see it here in the little picture as well. We're multiplying the catchment by the millimeters and getting a volume. So liters is a way of measuring a volume. This is actually a little mistake here. It's not going to be in cubic meters, it's going to be in liters, the result, when you multiply your square meters by your millimeters. So an example of that, for example, you could say we know that there's some rain coming on Wednesday. I don't think it'll be 10 mils, but say it was going to be 10 mils, the forecast says. And say you've got a house with a roof that is 120 square meters in area. So on that roof, if there were going to be 10 millimeters of rain, you would then catch 1,200 liters of water. If you've, got your gutters and everything sorted by then, that's how much you would catch. Or another example, and this might be an annual amount, right? So this is the average per year for Blackheath. Say you've got a house with a roof that's 100 square meters, and you are looking at getting 350 mils of rain in the year. That means you'll catch about 35,000 liters in a year off that roof. Okay, I'll just pause for questions again if anyone would like to get clarification on that. Okay, we can go over it again at the end if you like. So, how much water do we actually need to grow food in summer? Now we know sort of we can work out what we're going to catch, but how much do we need? Well, it actually really varies hugely, depending on where you are and how well you've prepared your garden and protected it. So those things that we looked at under using and losing as little as possible, if you get all those things right, then you will need much less water. But I still wanted to come up with a number, even if it is really, really just a rough ballpark figure, just so that we can start getting a sense of where we are at, whether we can actually catch enough water to, get through the summer. And so my estimate, and I've also sort of looked around at what other people estimate, would be about 2,000 liters for every square meter of garden. It's quite a lot. So you can imagine 2,000 of those milk cartons on 1 square meter. That's how much you're going to need. For each square meter, you're going to need a tank that's 2,000 liters big. So that's the challenge to get through summer. So if we say, how much water are you going to need for your garden? You do the same calculation as we did with the catchment area. You look at how big is your garden, you measure it, the length by the width, and then you multiply that area by your 2,000 liters, and that's how much water you're going to need to store in tanks to get through summer. Or get from some other source, maybe you will get it from a well or a municipal supply or whatever, but that's what you're going to need basically as a very rough figure. Okay, so any questions about that before I move on to stormwater? Okay, we'll go on to stormwater. These are the principles of regenerative water systems design. And regenerative really just means instead of weakening a system, we're strengthening it. We're putting more back in than we take out. So by designing things regeneratively, it means that when we finished, the place looks better than before, or there's more life in it. Okay, so to do that, we need to conserve water, which means basically that using and losing as little as possible. We need to start at the highest point. So we need to find where's the highest point that we have any control over. And that's where we start designing. Because if we can catch the water as early as possible before it has flowed down the hill, we've still got more options open for where we take the water before it leaves the site. Okay, then the next 3 things: slow it, spread it, sink it. That's what swales do, and we'll be looking at swales. They're for slowing, spreading, and sinking water into the soil. Then we want to store it in tanks, for example, or in the soil, and reuse it if possible. All right, so those are all principles that we can look at. applying. This is a lovely example of stormwater harvesting at the home of Brad Lancaster, an American guy who wrote some books about harvesting water in a very arid or dry place. He lives in Tucson in Arizona, where they've also got about, I think they've actually got less rainfall than we have even in the driest parts of Cape Town. So it started off like this in 96, I think it was. You see they had a very wide pavement here, but it was completely dry and sandy. And this is some years later, I think about 10 years later, you can see they've turned the pavement into a lovely shaded pathway where people can enjoy walking. And it's beautiful, it attracts wildlife. There could be some food crops in amongst these plants. It's a completely different thing. I would imagine walking along here on a very hot day would be very unpleasant, but walking along here is lovely. So, and how he did that was, well, we'll be looking at various ways of getting water off the road and into areas next to the road. So we want to create a harvesting landscape. You can see here on the left, the way things normally are arranged is that we've designed everything to get rid of water. We see water as a problem and everything gets directed to a storm drain and removed as quickly as possible. And of course, we are worried about flooding. So I can see that there's some sense in what they're doing here. But actually, if we apply some more thinking, we can actually put that water to use instead of getting rid of it and then paying very expensively to buy some more. And so what they're doing here is they've turned the road into a catchment, and they're directing the water off the hard surface of the road into these sunken basins where there's all sorts of plants growing. So that's a harvesting landscape that's been created there. You basically want to create a sponge. So that's what I was talking about with the organic matter. You want to really improve your soil to the point that it really stores loads of water in it. Yeah, I think this picture is just beautiful. It really looks spongy. You can sort of imagine if you were to walk across here, your feet would kind of bounce along. So that's going to really store lots of water. But yeah, even though we might, really create this fantastic soil and store lots of water in it, for veggie growing, we're still going to need water in tanks, like I was saying before. So we want to maximize our catchment and infiltration. And again, these are these basins alongside a road or a pavement. You can imagine there are lots of ways to do this. But you want to sort of remove it away from the house, but into a basin, away from the road, away from the pavement, and into these sunken beds here, which they act as infiltration basins. So they sink the water into the soil. And depending on the quality of the soil, it'll all get stored right there in the soil. Right. This is another example of these infiltration basins. Also a picture from Brad Lancaster. This is after the rain. You can see the water's all got drained off the hard surfaces onto the soil. And this is what it looks like once everything started growing. Some more examples. This is called curb cutting. So if you direct the water off the hard surface through a curb and into a bed, you can really grow a lot more stuff here in parking areas and so on. So it just is a matter of design, getting the levels right. And the same here. you can see these little weirs allow water to pass through once the water gets to a certain level, and then it'll come into the next part. And then when that's full, it'll come through another little weir and down into the next part, and so on. So that really slows down the water as well, means it doesn't just go crashing down along the road. It really gets slowed down and allows it to seep into the ground. And here's another example of harvesting between a road and a pavement. We do need to make sure we design for disaster. And what that means is basically imagining what would happen if you suddenly got a whole lot more rain than you expect. Because that could really become a problem. I was very worried about that. I thought, you know, if we didn't get it right, we might suddenly flood the neighbours, which would be, you know, terrible. But so we really need to make sure that we have designed for an excess and that we have an exit point. And depending on your layout, you might direct the water back out into a storm drain, or yeah, you'd have to look at your site. But basically, do keep in mind that, especially with climate change, you might suddenly get a massive big rainfall, and you need to think about what's going to happen with that large amount of water. So then the next thing is grey water. So we'll look at that. Grey water is basically water that has already been used once, mostly in the house. So you don't take it from the toilet or from the dishwashing sink, because the dishwashing sink is going to be very greasy. But you do take it from other sinks, like maybe in the bathroom, from the shower, from the washing machine, because the water coming out of those places is still usable in the garden. And I think you could say it's completely free because it's already been paid for its first use. So this second use kind of is just a free bonus. So a washing machine is a great example. It's a source of a lot of grey water. It's often one of the biggest items, you know, where you use the largest amount of water in your household. So if you can catch that and direct it into your garden, you're already winning. And the great thing about washing machines is that they even have a little pump, so you can pump the water uphill a little bit. So depending on where the washing machine is in relation to your garden, if your garden's a little bit higher up, you can still maybe get your water from the washing machine into your garden with a pump. And another neat thing I want to point out here is that this washing machine has got a flexi hose, and he just pulls it out and pops it into one of these pipes each time he washes. So you see they're marked. So this pipe runs down to his fig tree. This one runs down to an orange tree. This one runs down to a peach tree. So you get the idea that each time you put this flexi hose into a different pipe, and a different tree gets watered with the soapy water that comes out of the washing machine that time. Here's another lovely example of grey water. In this example, it's not coming straight out of the house as usual. It's actually coming first off the roof into a barrel, and then it gets used in this sink, maybe for washing stuff. I don't know what it's actually used for. But then the beauty is that they actually take this pipe out of the sink and direct it. You see here, that's the outflow into some sort of earthworks. It goes into the garden. So the water is getting used twice, first for washing this mug, for example, and then it comes out into the garden and benefits some plants there. Another thing I really like about this picture is that the tank is at this halfway height. So it's normally with tanks, you use either gravity to fill it or to empty it, but it's not often that you can actually use gravity to get the water into it and to get the water out of it. But the way they've arranged it here, it's completely just using gravity, no pumps at all. But obviously when you're working with bigger tanks, you will usually end up having to use a pump to either get it into the tank or out of the tank, because you can't kind of have it both ways. Okay, so there's always this issue with grey water, because it tends to, you know, if it's got soap in it or detergents, it tends to be alkaline, it tends to have salt in it, and it also tends to have phosphates in it. Now you might say, oh, phosphates, great. That's one of the, you know, the big fertilizers, you know, NPK, and phosphates is one of those. But actually, the soil can't store all the phosphates, right? So it's probably going to wash out, especially if your soil is sandy. It won't sort of stick in the soil. So the winter rains will wash out some of the salt and phosphates, but nevertheless, over time, they will build up in your soil, and especially the salt could eventually kill your garden. And the phosphates in the runoff, if when it runs out of your garden, will run into, you know, rivers, flays, and so on, waterways, and pollute those water bodies. So what you've done then is, by diverting it, you know, normally the water coming out of your house would go into the sewer. And if everything's working right in our municipality, then that water should get cleaned at the waterworks, and you know, that deals with the phosphates. But if you're diverting it out of the sewer into your garden, it is your responsibility really to make sure you're not then polluting these waterways. So make sure that water that runs off your garden isn't full of phosphates. And that means then using biodegradable soaps, phosphate-free ones, soaps and detergents, or something like washing soda. It does have salts in it, but at least it doesn't have those phosphates. And the salt will get washed out of your garden in the winter. And again, it's also a matter of dilution with the salts, at least. You know, if you are using other sources of water as well, then the salts won't build up so badly. Right. Another thing about grey water is that it gets stinky after a while. So you don't really want to store it at all, but certainly not for more than like a day, 24 hours. And when you're using it to water, put it straight onto the soil. Don't put it on the leaves of the plants, because the soap can damage the leaves. Okay, I feel like I've talked for quite a while. Are there any questions? Okay, so we'll move on. Next thing is the well water or borehole water. I won't go into that too much, but just to show you that a well, the difference between a well and a borehole, right? A well is a shallow thing, right? It just goes into this top bit of water, that your water table basically. So it's above the impermeable rock, and it's often quite shallow, just a few meters. Whereas a borehole goes down into a deeper aquifer, and it's a far more expensive and complicated affair, and it goes down into these lower levels of the soil, of the rock, I should say, which actually only get refilled in like hundreds of years, or maybe even thousands of years, right? So we can basically say that this water down here is non-renewable. It takes too long to refill these spaces. So I think we have to treat it as a non-renewable resource. So really, a well is far more justifiable than a borehole that comes right down to these levels here. Because once this water is gone, it won't be replenished. For a very long time. So even your great-great-great-grandchildren won't see water down there. I did try to find out very quickly about the situation in our aquifers in Cape Town, but I don't actually know what the story is here. So it might be that it's a little bit different here, but I don't know. We'd have to find out. But generally speaking, that's the case, is that it takes a very long time to refill these spaces in the rock. And so a borehole should really only be used as a backup. Well, that's the most sort of socially responsible attitude to take. And then lastly, municipal water is still, of course, an option, but it is expensive. But it's free for indigent households for the first 10,500 liters. And non-indigent households pay about $235, and the basic charge, and that depends on the size of your pipe. For me, it's 104 Rand. And then it gets very expensive after that. So for most cases, you know, municipal water is just too expensive to use. But there is some good news. I just saw recently that the city is offering free water for people who are doing subsistence farming and food gardens. And here's just a picture of that website from the city. So they say the city provides a free water allocation to subsistence farmers as well as organizations growing food for vulnerable groups. This extends to organizations with food gardens, including orphanages, soup kitchens at schools, indigent old age homes, HIV/AIDS facilities, and facilities caring for women, right? And then down here, I see that they say it's a 10,000 liter allocation per month. So it's not a huge amount, but you can certainly do quite a lot with that. Well, basically, if we think about it, I said we need about 2,000 liters per square meter. If you're getting 10,000 free a year, you're getting 120, whatever, I didn't think about this in advance. We're getting 120,000. So we can divide it by the 2,000. We can actually grow a lot of food if we can store that water in tanks. All right. Moving on. These are the storage options. Obviously, we want to store it in the soil, but we still need water for watering if we're growing veggies. All right. You can also put it into tanks. Mostly plastic is the most popular option. The plastic is recyclable, it should last 20 years. It's probably the most cost-effective option, unless you go for ferrocement, which is a DIY option. You can make your own tank, basically. You need to learn how to do that. But if you make your own tank, it might actually be cheaper. I'm not sure. And then the old tanks used to be made of steel, but now it's quite a sort of a fancy, expensive option. Dams and ponds, of course, are also great for storing water, but there we have issues with evaporation. But it is very beautiful to have a water feature in a garden because it attracts wildlife, predators for insects and so on, birds, lizards, frogs, etc. And then lastly, I mean, if you've got an old swimming pool or something like that, that's definitely an option. Again, I would cover it to prevent evaporation and algae. Basically, it'll go green if you're not doing something to turn it over and keep it clean. Right. So we're about to start with my just showing you what we've done in our garden. But first, I'd just like to see if there are any questions about what I've just covered. All right, I'll keep going. So this is a picture from the air. Thank you. I see a thumbs up. Thank you for that. This is a picture of my site or the place where I live with my family. with my parents and children and my partner, and we've got 2 more people joining us soon. And so this is what we're doing with water here. The yellow arrow shows you the municipal supply. So just showing you that it comes in to the house, but we also have water from the tanks coming into the house. So we can choose whether we want to use municipal water or tank water. And actually we don't use municipal water at all, really. So what happens is we catch the water off the roof, we direct it into these tanks here. So these brown tanks are for the house. Then we've also got the blue tanks. They are for the garden. So we store quite a lot of water. We actually store 70,000 liters for the garden. And where we get that water from is off the road, right? So I'll show you that little video just now of us catching water off the road. You can see it's actually a dirt road. So we're lucky that we can actually kind of make little channels and direct the water quite easily down through our gate into a drain. And then it goes in a pipe all the way around here. And then we direct it into this red line here, which is a swale. And I'll explain what a swale is just now. And then we also take the overflow from the brown tanks into these garden tanks at the bottom. So we've got these 2 and then 5 at the top for the garden. These red lines are all swales, so the one spills into the other. So when this one's full, it spills into this one. When this one's full, it spills into that one, and so on. And it actually only happens about once a year that all the swales are completely full, and we've never flooded the neighbor, thank goodness. But we do have ways to prevent it from going into the swales if we saw that it was going to be problematic. Another source of water for our garden is off next door. There's quite a big catchment area here off the driveway, off this roof, and actually this roof as well. We take all the water across and also catch it in our tanks. So that's also an option if you've got neighbors who actually aren't that interested in what their catchment, you might be able to direct it over into your site. Then the gray water is, I've just done one arrow. It's actually 2 places that we take it from. It also comes down here from the other side of the house. So we've got 2 pipes coming down out of the house with gray water into the swale. So that's one option, is you just take it straight into your garden like that. Okay, this is what my garden looked like before we did this whole thing with the swales. I was constantly battling. I just never had enough water through summer, and it was costing me a lot of water. It was costing me a lot of money to pay for municipal water. And I covered everything with shade cloth to sort of try and protect the garden a bit more. But it just wasn't viable. So summer was a real problem. And here's another picture of the garden further down. You can see it's okay, but it wasn't great. It was very sandy, and it was these straight up and down shapes as well, straight lines, and you'll see that all changed. So that's another before picture. This is now during. Well, what happened was, because I was struggling with the water, somebody told me to speak to a guy called Tahir, who some of you might know, Tahir Cooper, and he came and advised me to put in these swales. So this is where we started laying out the lines for these swales, the red lines that you saw in the picture before. And here's a completed swale. So now I can tell you what this word actually means, right? A swale is like a ditch or a trench. And then next to it is a berm. So this the bump is called a berm. and the low bed is called a ditch or a trench, right? So these things two together, these two things together are what we refer to as a swale. And in our case, the swales are on contour. Usually swales are done on contour. And what that means is that the bottom of the swale is all at one height. It's all at exactly the same height. Also, this upper edge here is roughly at the same height as well. And what that means is that it's like having a big bath, right? So when you fill your bath, as soon as the water's got to both ends of the bath, the water runs, or should I say it fills up in the whole bath at the same time, right? So it doesn't flow anywhere. It just stays there and fills up the whole thing at once. And wherever the lowest part is, and in this case it's over here, that's where it'll spill out into the next swell. Right. Okay. So just to explain this thing about contour a bit more, you can imagine lines that show one height going through the landscape. So if you were to walk along a line in the landscape, each line is called a contour line. If you were to walk along this line, you wouldn't be going up or down at all. You'd be staying completely level. So that's what contour lines are, and you often see them on maps. So on a map, they look like this. They're flat, of course, on a map. And you could decide to follow one of these contour lines for your swale. And if you do that, then you know that your swale is going to be completely level. Well, actually, no, that's just the design part. Then actually making the swale, there are other ways to make sure it's level. And this picture now shows you what happens with the water. This is the ditch or trench part of the berm of the swale that fills up with water, and then as it fills, it starts seeping into the ground, into the soil of the berm, and then the soil beyond that as well. And it'll just keep soaking down the hill and really filling up all this soil with water. And it makes a new sort of groundwater lens. We call it a lens. So here we are. We had made the first swale. That first red line that you saw in the picture was a lot of work. And we'd made sure that it was completely level, like down to the last ½ centimeter. So the upper edge and the bottom are all the same level. Well, sorry, the upper edge is all one level and the bottom of the trench is all one level. So this was where we were getting ready for a permaculture group to come and do their implementation day. Any of you who have done the PDC, the permaculture design course, will remember you'll have one day where you go to a site and you install a whole garden from scratch. You usually start with a sort of blank canvas in the morning, and by the evening you've done a whole lot of digging and planting, and you've laid the irrigation, and there's a whole garden done. It's the most awesome thing to experience in one day. So that's where we were getting ready for that. This was on the day. A whole bunch of people came and missioned for the whole day. And this is what it looked like at the end of the day, all completely sorted and mulched, and we've got the irrigation and everything. And each tree has got a tree pan around it. I'll show you some more pictures of that. Here, these are the tree pans. So around each pan we made, around each tree, we made this pan. And basically what it means is that the water that flows down from above comes into this area and sort of gets held by the shape of the soil. So it's a way of feeding a little bit more water to each tree and making sure we don't lose it in the landscape. There's another picture of these tree pans and the swale to the left. I must say, when the shapes became clear as we followed the land to see where the lines would go, as we found out where these contour lines moved across the garden. I got so excited because I just realized it was just so beautiful. These, if you work on contour, you end up with these beautiful round shapes, which are far more sort of natural and organic. And if you remember those straight up and down garden beds we had before, for me, this is far more beautiful. And it's also more functional because it holds the water in the soil. Right, so this is October 2016, so 6 months after the first permaculture implementation date. We had another bunch of students come and they did this next part of the garden. So by now we have about 35 fruit trees. It's hard to see them, they're all tiny little trees, but we've got 35 trees in this area. So this is now a baby food forest. September 2017, it's coming together, it's greening, it's growing, and it's looking great. But then there's the drought, and we had to get through a summer. By then, we only had 2 tanks for the garden at this point. We hadn't added the other 5. So we really battled through that summer, and that's what it looked like at the end of that summer. We lost a few trees, but not too much. And then we installed the new tanks, caught some more winter rain. And by October 2018, it was looking like this. So it's all recovered again and looking gorgeous, I think. And then July 2020, so this last winter, you can see it's actually becoming a jungle now. It's getting really beautifully overgrown and wild. Well, the fastest growers are actually these trees here. They're actually the Tagasastes. So they're the sort of support species that we put in to support the fruit trees. So Tagasastes are nitrogen fixers. So what that means is they take nitrogen out of the atmosphere and put it into the soil, but also into the leaves and branches of the plant, of the Tagasasti itself. So if you chop and drop, you're basically fertilizing the soil. So we've actually chopped and dropped those Tagasastes quite a few times, but they just keep growing prolifically and thereby help the other trees also to grow. Here we've got a fig tree. That's a peach. Over here we've got 2 pecans. I'm not going to point them all out, but yeah, there are actually 35 trees here. It might be hard to believe. 35 fruit trees, plus a whole lot of Tagasastes and other things. Right, and then October 2020, so just the other day I took this picture just to show you what it looks like now. And it's grown even more, and it's got to the point where if someone is in the food forest, you can't see them. You have to sort of shout and say, hey, are you there? Because you can't find them. So I think that's quite exciting what's happened here. If you remember how the soil was so bare and dry, and now we've really got the ecology going. The soil is looking much better, the plants are thriving, and we've got tons of insects and birds and all sorts of wildlife. We even have a heron that comes in now that we've never seen before, and all sorts of other birds. So that's the example. Okay, so now I wanted to show you a video, and to do that, I'm going to have to stop sharing and see if I can do this. Okay, bear with me, please. Oh, yeah, and after that, I'll stop for questions. So if you've got any questions, I'll stop after the video. So you can unmute yourself then for the end of the video. Okay, can you all see? No, not yet, sorry. And you see a video where it says normally stormwater goes down the drain at the end of the road. Can you see that? Yes, okay. So this is the storm drain at the top of the road. So I'll just turn off the music. I'll turn it down. There we go. This is Hilton, my partner, helping the water go to where we want it, down through the driveway and into a drain. So we made this drain here, and that drain is attached to a big 110 mil pipe, which takes it down into the garden. And you saw the neighbor's driveway there briefly as well. I'll tell you about that just now. There's Hilton, there's our 13 mills, which we're all excited about. And it's all flowing into our garden and not into the storm drain where it would have gone otherwise, straight down into the sea. And you see, it's like a big bath, all sitting in the soil and seeping into the ground. There we are. I've got to do stop share again and get back to the presentation. Right, are we back at the presentation? Yep, I see a thumbs up, thank you. So what we were doing there was directing the water off the road above us and then into the drain, which is connected to this 110 mil pipe. And the pipe then spills into that first swell, into that first red line that you saw on that overview picture at the beginning. And right. Another thing we've done since then, though, is actually very recently, we've just put in this thing. So this gate is the neighbor's gate, and this is our gate here. And the neighbor was getting a lot of water down their driveway, which they didn't want. And they were getting a whole lot of debris, rocks and sand coming down their driveway, and they kept having to clear the track for the gate so that they could open the gate, and it was a big hassle for them. And on the other hand, we really wanted the water, so we came to an agreement that we would make this thing with a grid over the channel for cars to cross. And then over here, it's just an open channel. And there's actually a hole in the wall here at the end, which directs the water through onto the paving inside that you saw in the video. So it's a win-win situation because we get the water we want and the neighbors don't have the hassle that they didn't want. So there might be other sort of scenarios like that you can imagine in your neighborhood where you solve someone else's problem and you know, get the advantage of it as well. Oh, and just to say, yeah, the neighbor wanted it to be a bit more tidy, and we're still going to fix this area up and make it look a bit nicer. Okay, so then I just wanted to show you some more examples. Oh, sorry, I said I was going to stop for questions and I didn't. Were there any questions, well, about anything I've said so far? Any clarification questions? Okay, well, it's nearly done now anyway, so that we can also have a discussion at the end. I just wanted to show you two more quick examples of other places where regenerative design has been used, basically permaculture. This one in Jordan was done by a guy called Jeff Lawton, who's a big promoter of permaculture. And the project is called Greening the Desert, so you can Google that. And you can see it was desolate, very dry. They've got like 100 to 150 mils of water a year, rainfall a year. But again, with the right interventions, designing it right, planting the right stuff and so on, they've ended up with this beautiful, dense food forest. So it can be done even with less rain than we have anywhere here in Cape Town. And one more example, this is the Les Plateau, which is a huge area in China. that got restored. It had got very degraded. You can see this terrible erosion here over thousands of years of agriculture. And the Chinese government decided to restore the whole landscape. There's a wonderful video about that by a guy called John D. Liu. So that's another thing you can look up. But just, I wanted to share you these things just to show you massive big changes can be affected. You can really turn degraded areas into beautifully vibrant spaces. So if it can be done there, it can be done anywhere, I reckon. And then we come to our last slide, which is about starting to map your site. Permaculture principle number 1 is observe and interact. So before you make any big changes, you really want to watch, observe, see what happens over time, and interact. So that means like getting out there, seeing what happens when you know, like with a spade, for example, dig a little trench or block, you know, some running water and direct it somewhere else. See what happens. So that's learn about your space, see how water moves through it. Okay, so the questions I'd like you to think about as you start, well, before you can map your site, you need to know where certain things are. So these are the questions to look at first. So what water sources are there near your garden? So it's just something to look at. Where's the highest point that you can sort of access, that you can have some influence over? Then can you catch water off the roof? Are there gutters and downpipes, or would those still need to be installed? Is there a washing machine? Because you remember that's actually the biggest amount of grey water comes out of your washing machine. Oops, sorry. And another question is, how could you catch stormwater off the roads, parking areas, other hard surfaces around you? How does the land slope? How does the water flow when it rains? Where does it run and where does it pool, right? Where does it gather into pools and where do you see it flowing fast? Where are the stormwater drains? And is there a well point or a borehole on site or nearby as a backup? Okay, so those are the questions to start looking at and start getting them onto a plan. Many ways to do a plan, of course. Yep, hello?
So there's a question on the chat asking, do you clean the storm water after collecting?
Right. Oh, that's a good question. I thought it might be sort of too much to go into, but what we do actually is we have some big, what are they called? Like TerraForce bricks that we made a little dam with actually right inside our yard. So it holds the water just briefly and it slows it down. And when the water slows down, it dumps its load basically. So any sand and rocks get dropped down, and then what's left is fairly well, it's still brown water, but it doesn't have sand and rocks in it anymore. So that's how we separate it out to make sure that we don't get the pipe blocking up with, you know, all sorts of debris. I don't know if that answers the question.
Paula, do you want to unmute?
Hello, Erika. Hello, Jill.
Hello.
It's Buyani and the team.
Hi, Buyani.
Hello, Buyani. Great to hear you.
Oh, yeah, thank you. The question has been answered. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, thank you. The question has been answered. Yeah.
You say the question has already been answered.
Yeah, what you've just gave us now answered the question that we had.
Okay, great.
There's no
great.
further questions.
Okay,
Thank you.
pleasure. Anything else? Any other questions?
Hi, Jill. It's
Hello.
Hazel here.
Hi, Hazel.
What about the water, the storm water and the water from the road?
Yeah.
Say I'm in the rural area where there's no drains.
Mm.
Do I have to make the drain myself, or do I
Oh.
have to ask the municipality?
Yeah, no. In rural areas, it's much easier to just work with what you call it, like just a channel, any kind of you can just have a little trench or a little drain. What do you call it? It's just a little channel basically, but it's just you just dig it in the soil.
Okay.
So you don't need to have expensive pipes and drains. But in urban areas, in the city, it can sometimes be useful to use those things because it might be harder to just have an open drain. But it really depends on your site. So there are many, many, many ways of doing this, and this was just one example.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Is there anything you'd like to go over again? Are you happy with the millimeter of rain, with calculating catchment, calculating, you know, how many liters you would catch off your roof?
Hello.
Hello?
It's just a comment. It's not a question. So, like, it's great that you have talked about finding ways to make sure that you can catch the water. And so, from moving on from this point on, it's just observing and interacting with the spaces that we wish to use, and see how can we catch water from those spaces as we go forward. So hopefully we can just find more resources on how to catch water more effectively.
Yeah. Yes, and it's completely unique to your site. So you know, there's no one solution fits all. So in each case, it's a matter of looking at your site and seeing what would work on your site. So my example is really just to show you sort of what we've done as an example, to show you what can be done. And then we can all learn from each other. You know, as we see more and more different sites, we start getting more of an idea of all the different possibilities. Because I believe there are plenty other sites that we could also look at where water is being caught in one way or another and directed into gardens.
Okay, one question though, with boreholes, what is the process to get one on your site? And is it a private business or you can get it from the actual municipality?
Okay.
Because there are great sites that we have, but there is no water source which is there.
Are you at a school or, you know, at a sort of an institution of some sort, or is it like a private space?
It's a private space. Actually, it's a community space, but it has been set aside for creating a garden of some sort.
Okay. Because I believe one can, the schools have been, and the hospitals and places like that, there is some sort of process where you can apply for a borehole. But otherwise, it is something that you'd have to pay for yourself, and it's incredibly expensive. So, yeah, I think really, seeing as a hell of a lot of water does fall on the city, it's a matter of catching that water because it's there. So we need to try and catch it rather than getting it out of the ground at great expense. We need to try and, you know, get our hands on this water that's falling on the city, because interestingly, far more water falls on the city than we use, you know, and yet we send it out to the sea and then we get water from our dams. It's a crazy situation. So yeah, if I can encourage you to try and get water off, you know, any roofs in your area, or any roads even in your area, it should be more than enough water. The challenge, I think, actually is in the storage, not so much in the catching, because storage is expensive. But if you can rather spend your money on storage than a borehole, I think that will serve you better.
Yeah, thank you, Jill.
Okay, pleasure.
I have a question for everybody here. I was wondering if he has got together with their neighbours and that they're collectively capturing water off of multiple roofs.
Okay, it's an open question to the floor. Anyone want to answer?
Can you repeat the question again?
Has anybody got together with their neighbours and captured water off of many roofs? So everybody in a block is capturing water and storing it together.
I can't say that I've thought of it before today. Oh.
It's a great idea to actually pursue, now that it has come up from this workshop. So we're definitely going to be looking into that and see how can we connect with the community.
Yes, I mean you could also get the children with the carts that have are anybody that's got little carts and go around and collect water from different households in the neighborhood, and you have 2 or 3 buckets in your cart of different colors. So if your clean water that's been used can go into the one bucket and slightly more dirty water in another bucket, and then that trolley comes back to your community garden and gets put into a swale or put into a container for storage.
Yeah, that's actually a great idea. So for the kids as well. Yeah. And you also spoke about like some DIY options to create storage. So maybe we're gonna play around some 2 liters or something, 2 liter bottles, because from the area where we come from, you get a lot of what's this? A lot of waste. Yeah, a lot of wasted 2 liters just floating around. So that's a great project to work around with. Bringing in the kids as well to help collect.
Yeah, because the water is there, hey?
Yeah,
it is. Yeah. Water. Yeah, it's a matter of organizing to get hold of it, to get it to where you want it.
So just thinking as well with the ferrous cement storage options, like, do you know what type of shapes? I know I've seen the round ferrous cement. I've also seen Aloysia, can't remember his surname, where he made ferrous cement walls and stored the water inside the walls. So I was just thinking with your question on capturing from the neighborhood, you know, it'd be quite nice if the inner boundary walls could become ferrous cement walls.
Wow.
Yeah, it's that Russian guy, yeah, who Alusha.
There's another great idea I've seen with eco bricks, where they mix them with clay to actually make they make chairs, but at the same time, you can actually make some sort of a container. And I think clay, when it hardens, it can harden enough to store the water, and with some treatment of the clay to make sure that it's conducive for storing water, so that it doesn't wear away with the water. So yeah, eco-bricks could be a great introduction to storing water mixed with clay, though.
Yeah. And maybe a tight strap around the outside or something to stop the walls from caving in or out. But I don't know. Yeah, be interesting to speak to someone who could, well, or just experiment actually, because then you'll have your answer. But it's an interesting idea, and I think we can get quite creative with the solutions.
The eco brick things that you make hanging off the wall will be lost. Or think about underground tanks, the walkways, ways issues.
So Erica, your sound is, I'm not hearing it properly. Could you repeat that, please?
Got space issues. You can hang tanks halfway up walls, and you can put underground tanks under walkways.
Oh, wow. Yeah, now you're really thinking creatively. I love it. So you're making space, you're stacking functions. That's a permaculture thing as well. Okay, anything else? Any other questions or just comments? Okay, so then there's actually rain forecast on Wednesday night. Doesn't look like it'll be an awful lot, but I'd like to encourage you to just because it's one of our last rains probably of the year. So if you can, get out there and see what happens. Where does the water flow? Where does it pool? Where does it sit? Where does it run? And start getting a sense of your site and what water does there. So if there's nothing else, then I'll just say thanks very much, everyone. Thanks for coming. And we'll see you again.
Yes, please unmute and say goodbye. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Insight.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so
everyone.
much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's such a
Olo
pleasure.
Lumondi.
Thank you.
Olene kukuletu.
Sabonga. Thank you.
Ndiyabulela.
Baik, dankie. Ya dibuka.
Enkosi. Bye-bye, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye.